Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here with you. I am not skilled at using a microphone or this, so I may fumble a little bit here. Got a few more students coming in. This basically started for me, I've been at this about 5 decades. I paid for my last couple of semesters of college by teaching people how to take the LSAT, GMAT, and GRE. Spent a little bit on this fiscal settlement. I do want to just briefly say this today is really just an introduction. We're going to go over some things that could change your SAT score just by being here today and absorbing some of these concepts. But over the next weeks and months, I'm going to be available afternoons, evenings, weekends. We're probably going to do something next Friday that you have time off. When I saw in the paper a couple of months ago that there were some budget problems in the SAT program that normally had been running here for years, wasn't going to be available, decided I had a little bit extra time. I'd like to give back a little bit. So my objective is going to be to spend as much time with as many of you who are willing to see whether or not we can fairly radically change your SAT scores. So let me just get a little bit of background here. Library Lab is a company I formed a few years ago. One of the objectives we are working on is to make test prep free for the United States. We are building a program, not just SAT, but ACT, LSAT, all the way through the MCATs. We're going to be distributing it through the public library system at no charge whatsoever. I started this an awful long time ago. As you can see, one of the things there, I was president and CEO of Test University. I was really the first large-scale online test prep company. Raised about $40 million in the year 2000, and basically started really the whole online test prep program. We took out some full-page ads in New York Times and USA Today announcing to the country that we could make this free to everyone. And the company still exists. It's been bought out a couple of times. But I kind of got into my head that the idea of students being able to get high-quality test prep only if they had the hundreds and sometimes thousands of dollars was just wrong. So I've spent an interesting amount of time over the last several years working to make it so that test prep is something that if students want to take advantage of it, it would simply be free, whether it be in schools or libraries or just available on the internet. And PrepMe is the company I was recently with in a significant way. You know the Naviance system. My partners and I sold PrepMe, which was one of the most successful online test prep companies. We sold it to Naviance several years ago. So I've literally been spending parts of the last 5 decades working on test prep. And as you can last see, I did my doctorate in it, where I literally tried to read everything imaginable on this subject. So this is something I hope I'll be able to convince you in the next few minutes and hours and weeks and months that there are some principles that I can share with you, that I can help train you with, that can make a fairly significant difference on what you're going to get in the SAT. And that can make a really significant difference on at least a couple of different levels. So our objective today is really simple. The combination of today and what we do over the next few weeks is to get you 100 extra points on the math section. We're going to be doing some work on the English section as well if we can schedule it. But the objective here is for those of you who have taken the PSAT or if you've done anything else to give you a baseline of where you are on the SAT, what is very achievable, whether we're talking about the SAT that you'll all be taking in March, or for those of you who will also be taking in May and June, what I'm looking for is to run this program for the next few weeks and months so that the average increase in score is 100 points. Now, just for a little perspective, 100 extra points on where you are right now can mean 2 very important things. It's a whole different level of colleges that now become available for you to attend, and it's probably in the range of around $10,000 per year in extra financial aid for whichever schools you're looking for. Because if you can cross certain thresholds, that's how much extra financial aid you're likely to get awarded. So we're playing for some reasonably high stakes, and it doesn't take that much effort. It takes a little bit, but it doesn't take that much to change where you are on this subject by that amount. I'm not going to promise anybody 200-300 points, but 100 points is absolutely an achievable objective over 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and then even into the May and June, we'll have a little extra time. That is an extremely achievable goal. Some of you, if you work at it, you're looking at the potential of 150 to 200 points. Because what we're not going to be doing is changing a great deal about what you know about the Pythagorean theorem and simultaneous equations. This is Trumbull High School. You guys should know you're in one of the best high schools in the state of Connecticut, and Connecticut is one of the best 3 states in the country for academics. Your basic background is very solid. You know the fundamental principles of math that are going to be tested on the SAT. Where students often struggle is with the test format itself. It's the test-taking skills that when you work on those in a fairly short period of time can make a really profound difference on your test scores. Oops. There we go. So, what's it will take to achieve the objective? Understanding what the SAT is actually testing. It is built by design, different than virtually any other test you've ever taken. Why does it keep doing that? Okay. Developing your personal strategies. And executing a realistic plan to prepare. One of the biggest misconceptions on the SAT is the idea that you are going to study for it as if it is a test. You simply cannot do that. Most of you have had some academic success because you pay attention to what the teacher is teaching, you get a feel fairly quickly of what is going to be on the next test. Most of you do a little bit of studying, a little bit of paying attention. You are not terribly surprised about what shows up on a regularly scheduled test. And the format of those questions is relatively straightforward. Therefore, you can study for the test, meaning you can put the specific information into your head that you're going to need to then be able to perform on the test. That is not what the SAT is trying to do. It's trying to test skills. By design, they're trying to give you questions that are coming at you in a very unfamiliar format. They're going to try and get you to apply math principles, but do it in a way where the test question is a surprise to you. So you've got to figure out, what is this thing actually asking me to do? To build that type of skill, you simply cannot do it in a relatively short period of time. The best analogy, it's just like training for athletics or dance or music. In other words, it takes time. It's skill. You have to build it up over a period of consistent progress. If you were trying to be in the Olympics, which we know is just starting up, none of them would ever try to not do much and then train for 10, 12, 15 hours a day in just a couple of weeks before the event. It would never work. You've got to do this consistently over time. There's simply no way to cram for a standardized test. And so I don't even like the idea of talking about teaching someone how to do the SAT. A much better word is training. This takes generally, to move your score in the range of about 100 points or so for each section, it's going to take for most students somewhere between 25 to 40 hours. Okay? That's the magic number. By having by raising $40 million of venture capital when I was running TestU, I had the ability to run a lot of research studies, very rigorous clinical studies, taking hundreds of students like you who have never done the SAT, paying them to go take the SAT, giving them a program where we controlled every single thing that they did to study, then paying for them to take the SAT again, and being able to track everything that they're doing and have really serious researchers look at the data. The magic happens for most students around 25 to 40 hours. Once you get to around 40, 50 hours, it starts to drop off. It never goes down, but you get what's called diminishing returns, meaning it's not a whole lot, you're not going to get a whole lot more benefit at that point. So what we're talking about here is 2 to 4 hours a week over the space of about 6 to 10 weeks. If you can invest that amount of time, that's how much of an improvement you're likely to see. Assuming that you're focused on studying and training with the right materials and getting some good coaching. Not easy to do all by yourself. Okay? So what the SAT is not, I may bounce around here a little bit, okay? It is not a test designed to assess what you know or what you have learned in school. Believe it or not, that component of the SAT is less than 50% of what determines scores on students' tests. In other words, if you guys are hugely better off in terms of your fundamental math skills versus a group of students a few towns over, even though you may have significantly better content knowledge, it's that content knowledge is only going to apply for about 40 to 50% of the actual scores. More of it is actually going to come from your test-taking skills. Okay? So what is the SAT? The SAT is a test of your ability to apply reason and logic to verbal and mathematical problems based on a limited body of knowledge under extreme time pressure. That's the game. It is really not a test trying to figure out what you know. It's trying to figure out, do you know how to perform under these circumstances with a really small body of basic information? Okay? This is not advanced calculus. The trig that's going to be on there is really, really simple. Somewhere halfway through about Algebra 2, you've got everything you're ever going to need to know on the SAT. The key is, do you have the skills to be able to recognize what the heck is this question actually asking me, how to do some manipulations so that you can let your basic math skills show through and actually get the question right. Okay, so I think I probably mentioned this already. So training for the SAT is more like training for sports or an artistic performance than it is for any class you have ever taken. Okay? This is the biggest problem. This is, to some extent, getting sort of into the psychology of it. But the biggest mistake students make is not recognizing that you've got to start this 6 or 10 weeks before the actual test to get anything that has any significant value. I cannot tell you how many times, if you were to do research across the United States, and people have done it, to find out what do students actually do to prepare for the SAT. A huge percentage of it happens in the week before the SAT, which means it's basically of absolutely no value whatsoever. You couldn't get a better tennis backhand, or you couldn't do a better dance move by simply trying it for the first time a couple of days before the actual performance. A human just could never absorb it, anything close to that quickly. So you've got to dedicate yourself to the idea that just a couple of hours a week over the period of several weeks is the key to getting any reasonable chance of a significantly better test score. Okay? You must know your abilities. You must have a strategy. You need a training plan to get ready. You need a plan for game day. And we'll spend a little bit more time on this on the end of this presentation. But I'll make the point now, and I'll probably end up repeating myself. One of the most important issues is being able to go into that test knowing where you are in terms of how you're going to approach the test itself. And I'm talking about timing issues and a couple of other things that we'll go into some more depth of. But this is as simple as, I'll attempt a sports analogy. If you're playing basketball and you can reasonably hit 8 or 10 foot shots at a reasonable rate, but as soon as you back up to 15, 20 feet, you can't do anything, then for you to go into the test trying to hit 15, 20 footers makes no sense. Optimum performance in something like this has to happen on the edge of where you are. For those of us who are going to watch some Olympics over the next couple of weeks, take the Olympic downhill skiing. The best skiers are not going to be trying to go 10% faster than they've ever gone before. That's nuts. They're going to crash and burn. What they're going to do, they have a really, really good understanding of what the edge of their ability is. They know how fast they can go and stay in control. And in order to have a chance to win, what they're going to try and do is go right to that edge, and then a few times go a little bit past it. In other words, your peak performance always has to be at the edge of what your ability is, and then just a little bit of stretching. So without knowing where you are, you don't have the ability to go into that test with some sort of a game plan. No football coach would ever put a team on the field without a plan. The plan would never be a whole bunch of plays that the players are not capable of executing. You would never have a dance performance where you were attempting to do something that you had never done before. So part of getting ready for the SAT is as quickly as possible figuring out, where the heck am I? And then being able to spend all of your time on that edge so that you can move that edge and get yourself the extra 3, 5, 8 questions or so that are going to materially change your score. Okay? You don't normally have to do this when you're taking a regular test. You're going to study as hard as you can, you go into the test, wherever it comes out is wherever it comes out. You don't have to do any sort of pre-evaluation. But here, especially because of the time pressure, it is essential that you know where you are so that you can set your plan to be able to work at that optimum edge. Okay? For those of you that are really not familiar with what you're about to face here on the SAT, this is what it is for the math. You've got 20 questions, 25 minutes. That's the no calculator part. The calculator is much longer, 38 questions in 55 minutes. As you can see, just doing the simple math here, you're looking at needing to do questions a little bit more than a minute per question. And that average is about as interesting as your average foot temperature when one foot's in a fire and one's in a block of ice. The average is not terribly interesting. And what I mean by that is what you've got to do is you've got to figure out how to go really fast in those first few questions without making a mistake so that you can then bank that extra time so that you'll have what you need to be able to work out the more difficult questions towards the back end. If you spend about the same amount of time on each question, you've got a terrible strategy that isn't going to be close to optimizing what you're capable of in terms of your best performance. Okay? So speed. First few questions are much easier than later questions, but they count just as much. One right is one right. That's all there is. Even though the questions come in very different levels of difficulty. Most students will get virtually all the first few questions correct. So as part of your training program is trying to figure out, okay, how quickly can I go? Recognizing the question is going to be very straightforward. The SAT must be delivered to you where the questions come in the order of degree of difficulty. It is not allowed for it to be done any other way. Okay? It does reset from the multiple choice to the fill-in part. So one simple little strategy that can instantly get virtually everybody in this room an extra 10, 20 points is to recognize that the first question of the grid-in is guaranteed to be easier than the last question of the multiple choice. So if you're running out of time, if you spent 2, 3, 5 minutes on the last couple of questions of the multiple choice and didn't spend an appropriate amount on the fill-in, you made a terrible strategic mistake. Because chances are a couple of those fill-ins are really easy, and the last 2 questions of the multiple choice are really, really difficult. So for the vast majority of students, you're going to have time pressure. Most really do not finish the math section. Usually there's a bunch of questions that you're purely guessing on or close to it. One quick point is worth it. That one principle right there, if you follow it on game day, can get you an extra 10 or 20 points. Okay? Okay, for the questions that make a difference, and I'm talking about the middle to the back end of the sections, it's not the math. It's the logic you must apply and the approach you take in the first few seconds. Okay? The majority of what I can help you with, both a little bit today and over the next several weeks and months, is not teaching you math principles that you probably already know. I suspect if I gave you a very straightforward assessment here on simultaneous equations, the Pythagorean theorem, the quadratic function, I would be very surprised if there were students in here who had absolutely no idea what to do with those math principles. But you're going to have trouble figuring out how to apply those in certain questions. The key is being able to quickly recognize what this question is about. So, to attempt another sports analogy, it's like a tennis serve coming at you or a baseball pitch coming at you. The key to being able to do well is to quickly figure out in that first couple of seconds, what do I need to do to react to this? If you can get that part right, the rest of your math skills will be able to carry the day. Meaning, once you get the question into a form that you can handle, you're going to discover that virtually every difficult question actually turns into something that's really straightforward and easy, if you can recognize what to do in those first few seconds. Okay? I don't know why that keeps happening. Okay, so this is really the guts of what can happen to really change students' test scores, and I call it the 3 T's. Okay? It's transformation, translation, transmutation. Okay? I'm going to give you some examples. I'm going to give you an opportunity to take a look at a couple of problems. If you can master just these 3 principles, okay, you're looking at 50 to 100 points. There's a couple other principles we'll talk about at the very end of this presentation. But these 3 principles are the key to getting a significantly better score on the math test. Okay? So, time for you guys to do a little bit of work. Take a shot at this. Okay? It's really, really easy. Half of you should be done already. Okay, maybe not. But please do. If you've got paper and pencil, I'm not going to make you, I'm not going to make you struggle with this for a really long time. But take a quick look at this. Don't be shy about getting paper and pencil. Come on. Paper and pencil. Give it a try. Okay, what? Not a lot of you are giving this a shot, which is fine. You're obviously not sitting at desks. It's not easy to sit and write, so I'm not going to try and force you to try and do this. Okay. The first thing I want to recognize, does anybody feel like they've got it? How many people feel like they've already got it? You know what to do? Excellent. Fantastic. Okay? The first reaction I want you to have on this question, okay? It's a really important principle, because that thing's ugly. Okay? Don't do ugly. Okay? Key principle of the SAT. Don't attempt ugly. What do I mean by that? 3x minus y equals 12. What is the value of x? 8 to the x over 2 to the y. What the hell do you do with this? This is ugly. It doesn't look right. I can't combine those 2 things. What do I do here? So what you need to get trained to do is whenever you see ugly, step 1 is make it prettier. What does that mean? Change the look of something that's really simple, that looks like it makes some sense. Why would you ever try and handle a fraction, the 8 to the x over 2 to the y, where those numbers don't match? How do I do this? Can you make it so that the numbers in the fraction look more or less the same? The answer is, of course you can. It's as simple as looking at 8 to the x over 2y equals, well, there we go. All I had to do is change that 8 to 2 to the 3. Right? All I've done is transform this to make those 2's match. Because now that I've got those matching, I'm a long way to getting this problem right. Because now, I simply can change its form again, 2 to the 3x. And then, of course, from the law of exponents, 2 3xy. I'm not doing any hard math here. I'm simply making this thing look different. And of course, if you go back to the answer choices, right? Let's go back real quickly. It's asking you, what is the value of 3x minus y equals 12? Look what happened when I changed its form. I got 2 to the 3x minus y. All I have to do is change that 3x minus y to what it told me was there. The math here was about 8th grade level math, maybe 7th. The key here was simply recognizing all you had to do is to recognize that this question was ugly, that you simply had to start moving it to something that looked better, and the question falls apart. Okay? This is one of the harder examples I'm going to give you. Okay? The others are, this is a fairly easy question in terms of its degree of difficulty. The transformation is a little bit more involved, but some of the others we're going to see are actually even easier in terms of how you make the question fall apart. Quick little principle here. And this is really important towards the end. I'm sure I'll end up repeating this. A hard question has nothing to do with its degree of difficulty in terms of how a teacher thinks it's hard or its level of computation. It is a statistical principle. It means how many students, when the question was tested, got it wrong versus got it right. Did the question was it only the very smartest students, meaning the students who got virtually every other question in the test correct? It's its degree of difficulty. There are questions that end up being, quote, hard statistically that you will discover you can do really, really easily because you will end up avoiding the simple mistake that many students took in the testing. One of the things that's very different about the SAT, again, versus any other test you've taken, is that your score has to be compared with scores over the last 3 or 4 years and going out in 3 or 4 years into the future. There's only one way for a statistician to do that. They have to know the specific degree of difficulty of every single question, which means every single question has gone through extensive testing. And it gets a value, 1 to 5. And then you assemble a test so that every single test has the exact same degree of difficulty, more or less. So that if you get a 650, it means the same thing as a student who got it 652 years ago or will get it 62 years from now. So every single question has been tested. And the way you determine that difficulty is all a function of which students get it wrong. A little quick digression. There's no educational value in ever giving a multiple choice test on math. Why would you? It should all be open-ended. The problem is you can't administer a test like this all open-ended. It would take too long. So they have to give it multiple choice. So you have facing you on that page 1 right answer and 1 wrong answer. I'm sorry, 3 wrong answers. How do you make those 3 wrong answers? The answer is you pre-test every question, open-ended. And then you look at what are the common mistakes that students make. And the ones that are statistically most prevalent, those become your wrong answer choices. So you as students, meaning your cohort, students like you around the country, you actually create the wrong answer choices in math by the mistakes you make when you're tested on these. The verbal is completely different. That takes $250,000 a year psychometricians to create the wrong answers in the verbal. You guys create the wrong answers by occasionally multiplying when you should have divided or adding when you should have subtracted. So part of what we'll see in just a few minutes is that you can occasionally get questions right by recognizing what students have done wrong, or you can at least do some elimination of answer choices because you can recognize, oh, I see an answer choice here that's really easy to make by doing something that can't be right. Okay? Let's take a crack at another one. I'm going to go over this pretty quickly because this is a tough format for you guys to be trying questions. Okay? If A minus B over B equals 3/7, which of the following must also be true? Okay? I'm not picking easy questions here, so I don't want you to get too worried about, like, holy crap, is this what these things are all about? What I am doing is showing you some fairly rigorous questions that can be dissected into some really simple steps and principles. Okay? So what we're looking at here is, okay, what the heck am I going to do with that? And one of the keys here, again, this is first 5 seconds, 10 seconds type of stuff. You need to recognize that that looks kind of ugly. It's not, if I look at my answer choices, it doesn't end up being like solve for X. I don't see answer choices there that reduce themselves to a single number or a single variable. So what this should be screaming, again, when you get a little bit of training, is that word up in the upper right-hand corner, transformation. It's telling me, when I look at the answer choices, oh, okay, everything on the left-hand side of the equation doesn't look like what is on the left-hand side of where I started with. So it's screaming at you, transforming. And you can do this relatively mindlessly, meaning you just start. Don't worry too much about where you're really trying to go. You want to just, this is like muscle memory. You want to be reacting. You want to just do it almost automatically. Okay? So that's what we started with. The answer choices are back up there in the right-hand column. Forgive me if I changed the capitals. Look at what I'm doing. All I'm doing is the A minus B over B. I moved it now, left-hand side, to separate it. Why am I doing that? Because I immediately recognize, okay, I can do something with that B over B. I just have to get it by itself. So, what is B over B? It's just 1. See what I'm doing here? It's the first 5 seconds of recognition that I've got a really easy transformation. And because of the nature of the answer choices, I knew transformation was the game I had to play. And from there, it's really simple algebra. All I did there, of course, was add 1 to each side. And there we go. Answer choice B. What looked like it was, I have no idea what to do. With the simplest first step, you've got a problem you now can very easily solve. How am I doing for time? You got to try this one just a little bit. Because I wanted you guys to work a little bit, and I don't want you. Is that halfway through? Yeah. Okay. Yes? 3 over 7 would be 7 over 7. Okay? Just spend a minute or two on this. I know every time I ask you to do this, we sort of, start turning into chat time. But if you would, take a shot at doing this problem. Even if you don't do the whole problem, try and think about just what we've already talked about and what you think is the way to go. Of course, you get that magic word up in the top right-hand column to help you. This is actually a little more straightforward than some of the others we've done so far, but there's actually a really nasty trick that comes at the end that is going to happen there's about a 2/3 to up to 100% chance you're going to face a problem like this, and if you can absorb this one principle, you've got a whole extra question right on the SAT. Could possibly even happen to you twice on the SAT, although that's rare. Okay? Nobody's really trying this. All right. Okay. Anyone want to offer what you think the very first step is to do here? Yes. Excellent. Right? You've got some information that you can immediately plug in. You can substitute in 2 for A under the radical, right? Okay, that's an obvious first step. What would be the next step? Yes. I think I heard it. Square, right? All right. So, this is where we're starting. I've made the substitution, right? And now I've squared. Because you can't do anything with that radical sitting on the left of that equation, right? And the instant you see that, you should know I can't do anything with this. So this is just a couple of examples of how you, first 5 or 10 seconds, you see something that you know, this isn't about setting them equal to each other, this isn't about diving in and simply solving. Step 1 is recognizing this is a transformation. And I promise you, with just a small number of hours, you're going to do the most important, you're going to learn the most important part of doing the SAT, which is when as soon as you see a question, you're going to be able to categorize it. The foundation of virtually all understanding of anything is first step, categorization. What am I looking at here? When you learn to recognize a medium to difficult question as a transformation, and you look and say, okay, this is pretty easy, I know what to do, the whole question just falls apart. Okay? So I've squared them, I've expanded it out, right? Simple FOIL method on the right-hand side of the equation. We're all familiar with it. Now I've got to move some elements around, set one side equal to, you all know we're heading towards a quadratic equation, right? And then it gets to that. And if you recall, the question asked you for the solutions to this, right? And someone just guessed A because you saw that, okay? Can anyone tell me, and this I'm going to be impressed if anybody gets this. Can anyone who followed what we just did tell me why A was wrong? Yes. What's that? You need to check it? Okay, why do you think you need to check it? You did something on an earlier step. This is one of the nastiest tricks on the SAT. Okay? It happens on almost every SAT. This is the easiest way for you to have a question that you basically know how to get right, and you still end up getting it wrong. What did we do in the third step on this screen? We squared it. And normally when you square something, it's simple, right? You just, 4 squared is 16, there's not much more to think about. But you were squaring a variable. What does that, if anybody gets this, I'm really going to be amazed. Whenever you do that, what do you have to have in the back of your mind you are doing that can potentially throw you off in terms of the final answer? Yes?
Distributing.
Good guess. When you take anything and square it, what happens in terms of positive and negative? Right? If you square a positive number, what does it become? Positive. When you square a negative number, what does it become? Positive. So what you have done by squaring something is you've created something you've got to watch out for. You've eliminated the negativity. Which means even though it looks like you've got 2 solutions there, What happens if you put those solutions back into the original equation? For those of you that are ambitious enough, if you play with it, you'll see that one of them, if you put those, a 3 or a 6, back into the original setup, you'll see that it solves itself down to -1 equals 1. That don't work. So the actual solution here is only one of those works. Anytime you square something, when you're dealing with an equation, you have to be really careful. If you've got 2 answer choices there or more, you've got to take those answer choices and insert them back into the original equation to make sure the elimination of the negativity does not end up making it so that you actually have an invalid solution. Okay? Yes?
So just at the beginning, could you just plug the answers in on the right side of the equation and slide that to one thing?
Sorry, I can't hear you.
You can just plug in, at the beginning, just plug in all the answers on the right side of the equation and find out the other thing. 6 has to be the answer.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know if I've ever heard it. You're saying, couldn't you just take all the answers and plug them in and realize which ones work and which ones don't? That's essentially what you said, right? One of the things that's interesting about it, and thank you, making a point I'm going to make a little stronger, I guess, in a minute or two. Part of why you can learn to do really better on the math test is you have something that you normally don't have. Other than the few standardized tests that you've taken, how many of you have teachers that routinely give you math tests in multiple choice format? Most of them are, right? The vast majority of your math tests basically give you questions that say solve for X, right? And you've got to show your work. You've got to work the whole problem out and there's nothing there. You have an enormous advantage if you learn to take advantage of it, which is because this is mostly multiple choice, the right answer is sitting there on the page already. It has to be. It's one of the 4 answer choices. The only legitimate possible answers are all sitting there. So theoretically, on virtually every math problem, if you had time, you could in fact take the answer choices and throw them into whatever's there and just do it iteratively, meaning just try every answer choice. The problem with that is that most of the time it takes enormously longer to do it than just using some of these techniques, which gets you the answer choice much, much faster. But you're making an excellent point, and I'll show you, I hope you'll think a good example of it in just a couple of minutes, where that is actually one of the ways that you can get 2 or 3 questions right at the back end of the section, meaning you're facing the most difficult questions on that part of the test. You have relatively limited time, probably at that point. In some cases, you don't really know what to do, and therefore you have to do something very different than a straightforward attack on the problem. Okay? 9:20? Okay. We've changed to the second T, which is translation. Okay? I don't know if they still call these word problems. Right? The key here is simply getting comfortable. How do you take verbal information, maybe a little bit of numerical information, and transform that, translate it into something that you can actually work with? This one's rather straightforward. I'm just going to walk right through it. $60 per hour. Have to pay for a water safety course for $10, no more than $280. How do you translate no more? It's an inequality, right? I heard it, somebody said it, right? The first thing you want to do is you look at this problem, what I would have wanted you to have done, and again, this is a part of training, just learning to do these very efficiently. As soon as you saw the words no more, what should have gone to your page was an inequality sign. Right? Less than 280. write the less than or equal to, write the 280. I now have, right, my inequality sign. I have the right side of my equation. Now all I have to do is build the left side of my equation. How do I do that? 60 is my rate, hours, so it's 60H. And then I have a fixed cost of $10, right? Which means it's a plus 10. And I solve from there. And now I just have to make sure I've read the question to say, what's the maximum number of whole hours? Okay? So we did this rather quickly. I've got another example we're going to walk through a little bit slower. Okay? When students first tend to see these problems, they tend to freeze. You read the whole thing, and you're like, whoa, there's a question, there's an equation somewhere in here, but I don't know how to build it. And you try and take it as a big whole, and you try and write out the whole equation, which is basically all wrong. What you have to do is, in the first 5 to 10 seconds, realize, okay, I'm not going to try and think about what this thing looks like at the end. I'm just going to build it piece by piece. And it's really, really simple to do that. So this is, again, a lot like training muscle memory. You've got to get to the point where it's almost no mind. You're not really thinking, you're just reacting. You know, okay, this is what it looks like. Not going to worry about what this thing looks like in the end. I'm just going to start piece by piece. Okay? How many liters of a 25% saline solution must be added to 3 liters of a 10% saline solution to obtain a 15% saline solution? Oh my God! Right? That looks complicated. It doesn't even look like math. It looks like the forms in chemistry. Right? And if you think you can just, some of you I bet can do it. You can just like, yeah, I'm just going to write out the equation. But most of you, I probably think that's not your first reaction. Your first reaction is, oh my God, how the heck do I make this equation? And the answer is you simply, step by step, do the translation. You write the equal sign. It said one solution plus another solution equals a final solution. So you just lay down on the paper. I got 2 things being added together, and they're going to equal a final solution. I'm not even doing math at this point. This is just logic. Okay. I got something, an unknown quantity of 25%. That's being added to a known quantity, 3 liters at 10%. And that ultimately is going to equal something that has to be 15%. And the quantity is going to be the quantity I don't know plus the quantity I do know. This is much easier if you've got this on paper. It's just laying the information from the question down on a piece of paper. Simple, straightforward, little simple steps. And from here, it's 7th grade algebra, 8th grade algebra. So what looks daunting when you first look at it, if you categorize this correctly, saying, okay, I know what this is. This is words. This is a translation problem. All I have to do is take the verbal information and turn it into its mathematical equivalent, simple steps. Easy to do today? Maybe not. Easy to do once you've done a half a dozen of these. That's all it takes. You may not get it the next time you try one of these, but I promise you, if you can categorize a question like this correctly, recognize it as a translation, do it a handful of times, no matter how that question comes to you, if you don't get overwhelmed by it, do it step by step, it just falls apart into something that is no more difficult than 8th or 9th grade algebra. Going a little faster than I expected to, but that's okay. All right. Each of 6 people had a blank card on which they wrote a positive integer. If the average, the arithmetic mean of these integers is 15, what is the greatest possible integer that could be on one of the cards? notice I've changed the T. This is now a transmutation. Just my own word for it. More or less correct. But what does this mean? Again, with a little training, I don't get very repetitious. If your first reaction is to set up an equation here, you're in trouble. It ain't going to be easy. What do you think I would want you to do as your very first step, first 5 seconds on this problem? I'm giving you a hint by the name here. Do that. What does the question ask you? It says, each of 6 people had a blank card. Again, little bit of training, you will recognize problems like this. What this is saying is, if it's telling me to start with 6 blank cards, I'm going to put 6 blank cards on the page. Because it's literally what the question is asking you to do. Most students won't do it. They'll try and set up an equation. They'll swish it around in their head. They will not do what the question tells them to do, which is transmute the verbal information into its graphical representation. That's what it really means. Okay? Okay, so I've drawn 6 silly little rectangles on the page. How does that help me? Well, it starts to give me a visualization of what this is all about. And it said, what? Let's go back. Right? If the average of these integers, what is the greatest possible integer that could be on one of the cards? Each card has a positive integer. I want one card to have the biggest number possible. How do I translate that? Well, if one of them has to have the biggest number, I guess I better stick the smallest number on the other 5. So that's all you have to do. And since the average is 15, and I've got 6 cards, well, what's the total? It's as easy as multiplying 15 times 6. So now I've got 90 sitting over there. And I suspect, when you first read that question, you're like, whoa, this is really hard to understand even what to do. But when your first reaction is simply to lay a graphical representation on the page, then recognize there's a little sleight of hand here, meaning, what does it mean to have one card with the maximum number? You have to flip it and think like, okay, that means the minimum on the other 5, and then just doing that. Look at how easy this ends up being. And this was a very, very hard problem when this appeared on the SAT. And it turns out that if you think of it logically, this is why I mentioned very early in this little presentation, the reason that most students struggle on the math section has nothing to do with math. It has everything to do with logic. You have to get trained to recognize question formats that are generally very unlike how your very good teachers try and assess you as they are teaching you Pythagorean theorem and simultaneous equations and the quadratic equation. When they're trying to assess you on those things, they most oftentimes give you very straightforward questions. You know the second you see it that that's what the game is. The game on the SAT is to shield them, to disguise what it's actually doing. And all you have to do to get better at this is learn these simple recognition principles to get it to the point where it's now using just your basic math skills, which are often, as you see, every problem we've done here, is when it got halfway through, it was down to 8th, 9th grade level, and sometimes even less than that. Okay? So we mentioned this a little bit already. How much more time have I got? I've got a lot of time. Okay. I guess I want to do a quick digression. So just try and get some information from you guys. Do you guys want to spend some time doing this? In other words, I'd like to make myself available to you for weekends, the afternoons, a few, weekday evenings. Next Friday, we're going to try and you guys know you're not here next Friday, right? Yeah, so you get this lovely 4-day weekend. We pretty much have already, let me get right to you. I'm going to try and be here pretty much all day next Friday. We're going to try and do some breakout sessions. We'll figure out what we can do in terms of a plan going forward. Can I just, at this juncture, get some kind of a show of hands? Are you guys interested in spending some time? We'll set up some peer programs, some online assets I can give you. Just a show of hands. How many are interested in spending some time doing this? Okay, good. All right. Well, that's somewhat reassuring. And I guess I want to make just one other quick digression to give you maybe a little bit more confidence. If everything I was telling you was stuff that could only be absorbed by someone that's really, really smart, then this is a waste of time. If you guys knew me better, you would end up agreeing with most of my friends, which is, Rick isn't all that smart. I'm not the dumbest guy on the planet, that's for sure, but I have no special abilities in terms of being able to overpower these questions because I can just do things in my head so much faster than anybody else. I don't have exceptional abilities whatsoever. My mother did her master's thesis in testing. My grandmother had her doctorate. Her specialty was testing. So I'm like the 3rd generation nerd doing this stuff. And everything that I'm going to show you, I promise you, can be done by students of very average to slightly above average abilities. If I can do just, one other piece. My daughter went through this school. She just turned 25 this week, so it was a few years ago. I wouldn't expect any of you to know it. She never took an AP class. Okay? She took a few honors classes. She got a perfect score on the ACT English section. She got deep into the 700s on her SATs. And I promise you, she was taking the exact same curriculum you guys are doing. The difference was, when she went in to take the test, she was in a whole different place in terms of knowing some of these principles, so that she got hugely higher scores than the students that she was sitting in class with. And she's just pretty much an average student. 25 to 40 hours of this stuff can do something that some of you might end up thinking is kind of magical almost, in terms of how radically this can change your school. These are relatively straightforward principles that can be absorbed in a relatively short period of time. All right, I'll spend the last bit on this. I talked a little bit about this. We've got at least one more interesting example we've got. Reverse engineering simply means you've got the answer on the page. And therefore, when you get yourself into a situation where you're not sure what to do, you need to start to look at, okay, how can I do something that is logical but obviously wrong to actually figure out which of these wrong answer choices are wrong? Which of the answer choices are wrong? As I mentioned to Principal Garino and some of your teachers, this is the part of learning how to do test prep that doesn't make any academic sense whatsoever. There's really no value in this in terms of helping you to be engineers or accountants or teachers or whatever going forward. There's no value. This is all gaming the system. But the students who are out there is getting $100 to $500 to $1,000 an hour tutors are learning some of these principles. And you don't want to be at a disadvantage of them, so you have to basically play the game. This is a fundamental flaw in the whole concept of doing this type of standardized testing. That if you know skills like this, you can apply them and you can get an extra 2 or 3 questions per section And as you know, there's 2 math sections, so you're looking at 4 or 5 or so questions just by being able to recognize that the test is flawed from the standpoint that they had to give you information that they shouldn't have. The answer's sitting on the page. The wrong answer choices were generated by previous students. There must be a logical way to create those answers that makes some sense but is wrong. Because I guarantee you, when they test these questions, especially the hard ones, there's a whole bunch of students who aren't very strong students, but they make guesses. They try to do something. They put answers on the page. And when they do that in a significantly, interesting percentages will do that, it creates some really interesting things that you can work with. One other quick point. If you have older brothers and sisters, they face the SAT where guessing had a penalty. That's gone. Okay? Guessing is absolutely free, meaning there is no penalty for getting a wrong answer. One of the silliest things to do is to finish the SAT and have blank bubbles. You've got to at least make sure that you recognize that if there's 38 questions in the section, you've got to have 38 little black ovals on those questions. Because even if you're just purely guessing 1 out of 4, right? If you've got 4 questions that you never get around to, you're still likely to get one of those correct, even though you were completely clueless. You may not have even read the question, you're simply coloring in an oval. Okay? So, let's take a look at this. And then we'll take some questions. This is actually a very old question. It's from the previous format of the SAT. I label it as question 38. That's actually changing it to the new numbering system. This was statistically the hardest question on this SAT when it was delivered many years ago. And it's one of the best, it's still the best example I've ever seen of this principle, of how with a little bit of training, and this is the key for those of you that are maybe already in the 600s, high 500s, you really want to push your score. It means you've got to get some of those questions right at the back end of the section that you really don't know what to do. A little bit of time on this can do amazing things to your score. Okay? So let me just walk through this now fairly quickly. Okay? You read through. How many different color combinations? 3 balls, 3 colors, orders not considered. Oh my God. What the heck do I do with this? I don't know how to draw a picture. I don't know how to set up an equation. I don't understand what this thing's doing. I wonder what students who were really clueless tried to do. Well, you know what? I bet some of them figured, what the heck, I'll take a guess. I'll take the 3 and I'll add it to the 3. 3 balls, 3 colors, 3 plus 3. That's choice B. This is the hardest question in the section. You know that because it's number 38. It can't be that easy. And yet there's that answer choice sitting there. Well, maybe it's 3 times 3. It can't be that easy. It's question 38. All right, I'll take one other crack at it. 3 to the 3rd power. Holy cow, that answer choice is there too. I didn't rig this question. This was a real SAT question. Those are the real answer choices. I haven't done anything to actually attempt to do this question correctly. I'm simply reverse engineering the answers by trying to do something that makes sense but can't be right. All I've got left is the 4 and the 10. With 3 balls and 3 colors, order is not the same. Do you think you can make more than 4 combinations? I think so. What's the answer? 10. Did you ever go anywhere near solving this problem the right way? No. How long did it take, the way I talked through it? 15, 20 seconds? You're going to be amazed at how many times a principle like this can be applied. There's nothing more fun. The teachers should just cover their ears now. There's nothing more fun than learning how to get questions right in the SAT when you have no idea how to do the question. You really don't know how to do it, but you can still get the questions right. Because of a fundamental flaw in the design of this, which is they forced, by the time constraints and the way this thing is set up, the right answer is sitting there, the wrong answers are sitting there. The wrong answers are not arbitrary. They didn't just throw random junk on the page. They actually did something that makes sense to the people who make the test, but is actually one of the dumbest things about the way they make standardized tests in the math section, is that they give you wrong answer choices that can logically be achieved by making simple mistakes. You reverse that. I'm going to eliminate wrong answer choices by making simple wrong mistakes. If you bank time and you get to the back end of the section and you're struggling with some of these problems, in each section this is worth 1, 2, or 3 questions. By having the time to go at this in a completely pedagogically, meaning there's no educational value to do it this way. You shouldn't be able to do this. The overwhelming majority of students out there have no idea how to do this. You can learn how to do this in a small handful of hours. Okay? We're good. I'd love to take some questions. If you came here today with the idea like, oh great, I can sit there for like 90 minutes and I'm going to get this magic injection, or something's going to filter through the ear and I'm going to breathe it in and I can do better in the SAT, then you're probably disappointed. But hopefully I've shown you just a little bit, right, of how some problems that actually look pretty difficult can turn into something fairly simple and straightforward. By the way, this is obviously a math pull-out. We're going to do the same thing for English. There's some even more powerful techniques that you can do on the English side of the SAT, so we're going to be spending some time with that. But with the time we have available, we don't have much time because I know you guys are going to get back to class for 10 o'clock. I'd like you to spend at least, I'll take any questions you have, at least one. Yeah?
So what is the correct answer for the 6 cards?
The what?
What's the correct answer for the question with 6 cards and the average is 15?
I think it was just the 6. I think the 3...
6.
Yeah, I think it was just the 6. You're talking about the question where I said you had to eliminate? Oh, the 6 cards is 85.
85.
Yeah, sorry. Right? 1, 1, 1, 1, 5 times. The total has to be 90. You add an 85 on your card. There's your answer. Did you mean this one? This one right here? Yeah. Okay. You just write it in. It's just 85. Okay. Other questions? Maybe something more general? Losing control of you guys here. I know you guys have got a lot going on. If you're normal high school students, you've got some after-school activities, some of you have got jobs, some of you have got some serious course loads, which means you need, most of your waking hours, you're at least trying to find some time to do some extra studying. So I know you've got pretty full plates, which is part of why I want to make myself available to you for some afternoons, some early evenings on weekdays, even some weekends. If we could just spend a couple of minutes, how many of you might be interested in spending some time, not ever more than 90 minutes per section, okay? Because nobody should listen to me for longer than that, and you guys have had long days already. How many of you might be interested on some like Tuesday or Wednesday afternoons, from 2:30 to 4. Can I just get a show of hands? Oh, that's fantastic. Okay. How many of you might be interested, because you've got sports or you're in a musical or whatever, might be interested in some weekday early evenings? Almost the same number, right? Here's the hardest one. How many of you might be interested in doing something on a weekend? Holy cow, you're willing to get out of bed. Okay. That's fantastic. We're going to try and schedule all of those then. Okay? It's probably not going to be every single Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday afternoon, but I'm going to try and make myself available at least 1 or 2 weekday afternoons. We'll try it. We can't do Thursdays. I have to teach at Southern on Thursday nights. Mondays are usually a really bad night for a whole bunch of reasons. So Tuesday and Wednesday nights will probably be the sweet spot for the early evenings. For Saturdays and Sundays, can you, again, just get, would you guys want to get up, or would you rather this started so that you can actually get a little bit of extra sleep? You guys better sleep. You know, I probably can't do it every single, not even close to every single weekend, but we probably could schedule, and I don't know that this would be at the school, it could very well be that we'll like shift this to, you know, Trumbull Library, because I don't want to have to cause the building to be open if it's not open. But maybe there will be times, because of play practice and whatnot, it'll be easy to get in here and use space. If that's a problem on weekends, we'll set up something maybe at the Trumbull Library or some other convenient space that we can get what we need. Probably, what do you think about 10 a.m. on Saturdays? And then we'll probably do a 1 o'clock session as well. So there'll be a 10 and there'll be a 1 at least a couple of times for the next couple of months. Question? Yeah.
Guys, you need to be quiet. So you can hear the question, you can hear Dr. Bolton's response.
Sir? Yeah, we can do that, sure. Actually, one of the reasons I want to do this, and Principal Garina knows this, I don't want this to just be a program that helps you guys. I'll take the question. Go ahead.
Does your program have tutoring stuff?
Tutoring?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to the extent I can. I don't know how much to, I mean, what I just saw was really encouraging in terms of the number of you that are interested. What we're going to try and do is give you some diagnostic texts quickly. We're going to try and break you into some groups where there are going to be students that basically need the same kind of help at a certain time. One of the most important simple principles is always be working on your weakest, area, right? Why would you be spending time on something you're already reasonably good at? So part of my job over the next couple of weeks is figure out what is your weakest area and make sure you're in a group or we give you some help in that particular area. And if you can take your weakest and turn it into your best, you can just rapidly change your skill level. So in terms of tutoring, what it might end up being is not straight one-on-one because the time may not allow, but we can at least get it down to, tutoring in terms of 3 or 4 students or so that we're all working on the same thing because the 3 or 4 of you, that's exactly where you are at that point. There's going to be some online resources. Khan Academy is very good for some stuff. It's really good for the fundamentals. The problem with Khan Academy, in my opinion, and I've spent a lot of time with the College Board, back when I was running TestU, we were in negotiations to be the Khan Academy. In other words, the online resource for the College Board itself. The only thing that I have to say is slightly negative is it's like you guys don't, you don't do your taxes yet, but you probably understand the principle. It's like learning how to do your taxes from the IRS. Well, yeah, they're going to teach you the rules. They're just not going to tell you how to game the system, right? They're not going to show you how to minimize what you're doing. They're simply going to tell you straightforward. And that's what Khan and the College Board have a real hard time with. They want to teach it to you the way your very good teachers will teach it to you. There's nothing wrong with that. The problem is it can only get you so far. When you need some of the strategies in terms of, okay, how do I do this when I'm not quite sure how to handle it? You're never going to get that stuff out of Khan. They're never going to put it in. Okay.
Any other questions? I think within the next, I'm going to be meeting with Principal Guarino here, right after this. We'll try and get a schedule out to you. And where I was going with this, I don't want to be just doing this for you guys. What I'm hoping is going to happen is that we together are going to be developing some new materials. Some of the materials that I have can be improved, and you're going to help me do that. Because what we're hoping to do is, as you can see, we were filming this. Some of the other things we're going to capture. I'm going to take some of the work you're doing. You're going to show me some things I've never seen before in terms of ways that you're struggling or a better way that I can explain something. And we're going to try and turn that into e-learning courses and other assets so that what happens is when this is done, we're going to have an archive. We're going to have a website. I've got a whole learning academy. One of the companies that I own builds these things. So what we're going to have is a resource that Trumbull can use for years and years to come. So this is not just a matter of you guys, me spending some time helping you guys. Hopefully you're going to spend some time with this. It's not only going to help you, but it's also going to help your younger brothers and sisters and students that are going to be going through this in years to come. I don't want this just to be a one-off. I want this to be something that, even if I can't afford the time to do this, for instance, in the fall, if we build this together, we're going to build a whole bunch of assets, even some of the sessions you don't get to participate in. We're going to archive those, we're going to make them available online. You'll be able to use them in some time that you couldn't schedule yourself to be in a session. It'll be available over the summer, it'll be available in the fall. So if you do have to retake again, you'll have all of what we all create and learn together. We're going to build that together and have that available for years to come. So this could be a fairly exciting project. Some of you are going to end up learning, some of you might end up getting into a peer-to-peer tutoring program. Or maybe some students here, or maybe some of the AP students will get involved in helping us build some things. We're going to try and do this as a community, build some long-term assets that are going to help you not only in March, when you have to take the official one from the state, but when you take May and June, which is where some of you are really going to be targeting to get your best score and to do the essay, and then you need to do. The idea here is not just to make this a handful of weeks, but to take this all the way through December by building these long-term assets that you'll be able to use that when you've got your final SAT scores, and in the fall, you're trying to do your college applications. You've got some options that otherwise wouldn't have been available. Okay? So we'll work on the schedule. We'll get those out to you quickly as possible. Thank you very much for paying attention. We're going to have some fun.